So now we're going to start to put in our shadow colors. I have sap green here, and you can see pretty much the lighting on this tomato is about where it should be. So our darkest color is going to be on this right side, and I'm just going to kind of go in here. Don't start too dark. Keep it light. You can always build. Remember, we just talked about glazing. So you can add layers of color as you go along. And I'm putting in where I think the core shadow is going to be. Don't take your shadow all the way to the highlight. Make sure you leave some space for the local color to be included. All right, I'm going to have to wait on this now because it's a little wet. So I will go to then neutral tint. And remember, your neutral tint tends to be very strong. So you don't need for it to be too dark or make a puddle that's, make a puddle that's quite light. Again, you can always add to the through the process. So this one I will do with neutral tint. Remember, if you need to do gradation, clean your brush, take most of the moisture out, and then blend it into the subject. I'm going to treat the stem a little differently. I have to wait for the stem on the, I have to wait for the tomato to dry before I can put shadows in the stem on the neutral tint version. But as you see on the one that's complement, I already had put down layers of red because the green is the complement. I'm going to go back in here now, and I'm going to give a little bit more shadow on this core shadow side. And then blend it out. So that you get a nice gradation in the process. All right, that's looking good. All right, let's go back to neutral tint. And we'll put a little bit more color in here, although it's still a little wet, so I may have to wait. All right. So if you look at this tomato, you will see that there's all kinds of colors, and you'll probably see it actually better on your computer screen because you've got, the light from the computer screen is richer than this printout. But there's a lot of warm red in this, and there's some dark reds, or cool reds really in the shadow areas. So aside from the complementary application of shadow, you can add further interest in the tomato by varying the kinds of reds that you put into this subject. But you always want to work from light to dark, and from bright subjects to darker subjects. So the last colors that you're going to put down are your deeper reds, and you're going to start with some of the lighter reds to begin with. So once this dries again, I think this neutral tint now is probably ready to go. Not yet. It still feels, you see, I'm getting a little bit of cauliflowering here on the edge, so I want to pick that up before it gets with a clean brush, before it becomes too obnoxious. Who would have thought? Wipe it down and then dab it up so that it's not going to just sit there and look at you and say, why didn't you do something with me? So I'm going to have to wait. This area is going to need more darkness. Let's see. We got to wait. So while we're waiting for this to dry, I mixed up some colors. This is actually Scarlet Lake. This is Permanent Rose. I wanted a little stronger color to go with the diluted versions that I have. And then I also mixed up a little Scarlet Lake and Cadmium Yellow, just in case I wanted a little bit more brightness in some sections of this tomato. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to base what I do on what I've painted here, since I don't have the tomato in hand. But I think we'll get it to work out. So this is dry enough. Doesn't have to be perfectly dry, but it has to be dry mainly to the touch, so that we can start to put in our local color. Remember, as long as you have a puddle, this thing is not going to leave an edge. And it's very important that you paint and get your brush right to the edge of each layer of color, so that you don't have irregular edges on the painting. Okay, so now that we've got a single layer on here, you can go back, you can go in. Actually, I'm going to use that yellow-orange and lay some color in. It's pretty wet right now, but I think it'll be all right. And as I say, you get, as you put more color down, it will kind of, any blotchiness will take care of itself. Cleaning the brush so I can feather this edge. And I'm only feathering it so that I don't have hard edges. Not necessarily because this is where I want it to get lighter. I actually want it to be, I want it to get lighter towards the center where I have the highlight, rather than along the edges. And I think I'm going to take my towel here and pick up a little of that so that I get my highlight back, and then feather it with the tomato. You need a little bit of a stronger highlight. All right, I'm going to let this dry, and I think I'll go back in now, and I'll put a little bit more neutral tint onto this other tomato. I pulled some of the moisture out of the brush just so that I could get into these fine edge areas. And now I'll clean the brush and feather this out so we get a gradation. I can't do too much yet with the stem, although in some of these areas I can go in where it's not wet. So I just dampened this area right now with paint. So now I'm going to create a shadow on this stem. I'm basically just going to follow what I've got here because I don't have too many options. And I'll put the shadows in based on feathering them out to the highlights. And I can do that here too. I can't touch this because this is wet, but I can go in here and I can create a shadow for the fold of this particular brat. Now when you do this tomato drawing, don't just draw it very casually. You need to give this drawing as careful a detail as if you were doing it as a pencil rendering. It will make a big difference in the overall appearance of this subject. If the drawing is good, the painting is going to look good. So make sure that you really give attention to that, that drawing. All right, I'm going to lay some Scarlet Lake on here now, on this one. Again, look at where your highlights are. And I want to feather that out before I lose it. Notice when I feather, I just touch the edge of the painted area so that I don't drag the pigment all over the place and make it too much the same. Now, since this paper is fairly damp underneath, I should be able to soften these edges without too much trouble. Clean the brush. And you see I just touch the edge and bring it to where it needs to be. As soon as you see it picking up paint, clean the brush again, because all you'll be doing is just pushing paint around and not getting the solution that you want. Now this will be a little tricky to paint around these leaves, but in a future lesson I will show you how to use the Maskoid, and that'll make your life a little easier sometimes. Alright, see if I can get another layer of color on here. As you can see, I'm working with a much more concentrated solution of color than I did before. Now I'll clean my brush again, dry it up quite a bit at this point, and just soften those edges. Clean the brush as soon as you start moving too much paint around. You can see here where it's started to get a little too much pigment coming into the brush and then going back out onto the page. Now we got to wait some more.